Are we live?
We are now. So we're gonna have to wait for the
All
button
right.
to go. Good morning, Hacksters. Just joining us. This is Jason Kridner. As usual, it's our Tuesday Hackster Café where we talk to someone who's doing cool stuff with electronics. Jason, you've been with BeagleBoard.org for a while. I remember like one of our earliest videos is
Yeah.
us in the old Hackster studio with a horrible reflective background. The lights would shine back at the camera. And but you were telling us about, I forget which, it might have been like the green BeagleBone green or something like that back in the day, before the blue robot one. I don't know, it was like one of the first ones with like lots of wireless on it, maybe. Could be wrong, but yeah, there was like
Could
the white,
be the
black,
green
green.
wireless. Yeah, I mean, because there was a
Yeah,
whole bunch of different variations, all with that same AM3X ARM Cortex A8 processor. There was a lot of different board variations, including like the blue, which has like all the integrated
robot
stuff
stuff.
in it, right? With the robot, yeah, the motor
Mm.
drivers and the battery charger and the, you've got IMU built into it, and yeah, that one's a fun one for sure. And just having it all integrated with all the software in one is fun. But
Mm.
so now we're integrating other new fun features.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're here to talk mostly about the BeagleBone AI 64, which is the new clone of. Oh yeah!
Yeah. Opening up a fresh one for you.
Ooh, nice bookshelves, by the way.
Oh, this is sorry. This is I got some markings on this one that you wouldn't normally have because we're doing some prototyping.
Ah,
Yeah, sorry. This is a different DDR on this particular board, but this is it with the big honking heatsink, right?
ooh,
And
wow, dang,
the elephant on the board.
that is a large heatsink. But big brains require big heat sinks. Let's take a look. We've got a close-up look on the BeagleBoard.org blog right here,
Nice.
and there's so much stuff that I want to ask you about this. So this is
Cool. And
actually
Alex, it's just really nice to talk to you again. I got
oh,
I love to just dive into the boards and stuff, but just like been so long, we've been away from
I
things. Yeah,
know, yeah,
I hung out in the old Hackster studio, but like we used to see each other at the maker fairs and
all the different, the
all
maker,
the different stuffs, right? And it's nice that some of the different stuffs are starting to happen again.
yeah.
Yeah, it's so
Two conferences recently, only for a few hours each, and I was like the only person wearing a mask. But
oh no.
it's still awesome, and like starting to see familiar faces again. It's really lovely.
Yeah, it feels really good. We were at Embedded World, so
Mm,
it's some different faces, but still a lot of familiar faces for me, and it was just fantastic to finally see some people again.
yeah, and we started this cafe series during the pandemic. We'd had
Mhm.
occasional interviews before, but this is the first time we've had like a weekly show, and I really love it. It's like it's been a great way to stay connected with people and
Cool.
get to talk with awesome people like you
Uh,
and hear about the cool stuff that you're working on. Yeah, tell us, what about your personal history with BeagleBoard? Like I mentioned, we've done interviews going back like at least 5 or 6 years. And tell me about how you got involved with BeagleBoard.org.
well, it's my brainchild, so I
It's you.
founded it.
You
Yeah,
are it.
yeah, it's my baby. So we actually Gerald Coley and I were the founders of
Ah,
BeagleBoard, and
how did I not know
he's just
this?
a very talented hardware designer,
Hmm.
and was really knowledgeable with working with the TI mobile phone chips at the time, right? He was really designing
Uh-huh.
those into a lot of different applications. And I said, well, hey, if we made a board that used the guts of the latest stuff in mobile phones, I think we could make something really attractive to open source developers.
Mm.
And so we started this back in 2007
Wow.
and been going at it ever since, right? So Gerald's kind of moved on to focus on other projects. He's still doing a lot of engineering design work. He left TI a few years before I did, right? So I left TI just a year and a half ago,
Uh-huh.
and now I'm just I have my own design business, and then I sit on the BeagleBoard Foundation board as the president, and I do some work for the foundation at times, right? But so like helping to bring ideas like this to life, right? The AI
Yeah.
64, right? That's kind of what I'm doing, and we've had a lot of stuff in the pipeline, with the shortages around semiconductors. That's really been kind of
Yeah.
limiting. We don't want to launch anything. We've had some false starts, so we don't really want to try to launch anything until we can be sure that we can actually supply the market in some sort of
Mm.
reasonable way, so that there's always new boards coming, so that when teachers create curriculum around things, they need to know that
Mm.
it's going to be available for long term, and that their students can actually get them in the fall semester, spring semester, right? That there's going to be some boards out there, and
Yeah.
so this one, the AI 64 has been sitting around for a little while, until we could actually build up enough parts to be able to make sure that people can actually get them.
Yeah, that's really considerate. Having had two parents who were both teachers, it takes so long to develop a curriculum, and it's um is that sort of your main, sort of obviously, you appeal broadly to the DIY
Mhm.
market and, like, people who are into computers and wanna get into hardware as well, like, we see a lot of the people, like, coming from the software world and wanting to get their hands dirty with, like, the nuts and bolts of what they're actually working on.
I'd
Yeah,
say
really.
the university students get to be a little bit of the primary focus, right? Because they
Mhm.
are the ones learning how to work with the embedded systems, and giving them tools to do that very different. um, the ways that are simpler allows them to prototype faster,
Mm.
have the level of details and controls that they need to actually look at the process going all the way into production, right? Enables them to come out of school and do startups, doing things like making cheeseburger robots right out of
Uh-huh.
BeagleBone Blacks, right? So we've had a lot of success at kind of getting people engaged in universities and have them go into industry, and actually apply those things, and either use Beagles themselves directly in production. Now that's on them, right? We don't take any responsibility for what they do in their products, but they have all the details. They can apply their engineering expertise to suit it, to fitting that into it, to an actual product, like the Dremel laser cutters, right? That
Ooh, yeah.
use Beagle bones, right?
Oh.
So there's a lot of different places. So it's kind of like from education all the way to product without getting any in the way, right? That's our vision, right? And if you respect the hobbyists, right, the things that they need to kind of come
Mhm.
up to speed quickly, right? Those are the things that are going to help students. Those are the things that are going to help engineers that have very limited amount of time to
Mm.
go kind of learn new tools, right? And so we've tried to bring that to an embedded AI platform with the AI 64.
And you've been very involved in the hardware community, so part of that involves how you design the board, how do you design the ecosystem, what you put on it, and also part of it involves, like, education and the kinds you're
Hmm.
constantly, you've come on so many different times, or since boards or whatever, all you're always involved with the DIY community, and we see that from the Hackster perspective as well. Like you're constantly, whenever you have something new, you're like, here's how to use it, here's how you actually I love the pocket beagle, by the way. Still my favorite. So good. But yeah, you're so involved in making sure that people have what they need to learn. It's
Well,
awesome.
the do-it-yourselfers are definitely my peeps. So,
Mm. Because
we
you're the
just
ultimate DIYer, basically. You made a whole thing and started distributing it.
yeah, and like, getting to know the distributors and work with them has been a huge part, right? They really enable us, so that we don't have to do Kickstarters and things to kind of bring new projects to life, right? We can kind of go directly to our community with new projects, new products. But it's uh, you know making hardware is, I think everybody should do it, right? And
Yeah.
it's not easy. And anything that I can do personally, or that I can work with people, that are kind of part of the Beagle community, to kind of help people get started along the hardware path, right? I'm super motivated to do that, right? I think this is, um, we need more kind of electronic artisans, if
Yeah.
you will, right? So people kind of making electronics that really serve people rather than somebody else, right? Serve
Yeah.
you. And so hopefully, we give you some tools that are open enough to go and do that.
Nice. Yeah, as someone who's built, you were collaborating with someone to create the platform in the first place, but um, having done the hardware parts and bringing that to market, and now being sort of a number of years down the line, like what is it, 2007? That'd be like, oh my gosh, my
Don't do
brain,
it.
I
Don't do
can't
it.
do math right now.
Yeah,
It's like
some
25
odd
years now.
6.5 million
No,
Beagle
that's
Bones
not right.
ago.
It's like 15 years. My brain. I'm not even
It's
gonna
it's like
try.
they're
I'm
Yeah,
just.
it's about 15 years, right? So and some odd 6.5 million or so, I guess, coming up on 7 million Beagle Bones later. Um,
So what were the challenges that you faced at the start, and now you feel like maybe you've solved some of those, and what still comes up as someone like this far down the line?
um, the different skill sets across different communities, when you look at building electronics, are pretty diverse, right? And sometimes
Mm,
people don't speak the same languages, right? And we've
mm,
kind of got that again with the kind of the neural net or AI machine learning world as well, right? So the communities, right, really kind of collaborate around certain things, and not necessarily kind of have the whole picture. So that's always been an ongoing challenge, right? So uh, we've we haven't always been completely focused around on Linux, right? It's always been about open source software, open source hardware,
mm,
but the Linux community and the Linux software, right, is kind of it's kind of the one place where so much human knowledge around computers gets preserved, right,
mm.
through the Linux kernel. I can't say that we're perfect at upstreaming, but I can say that we always care about the upstream, right? So, like, one of the things we tried not to do, and maybe we've gotten off track at some points, but is like try to do like driver libraries in Python. Like
Mm.
that's kind of a bad thing for a whole bunch of reasons, forgetting
Interesting.
about the poor performance of doing stuff in user space.
Huh.
But there's already thousands and thousands of drivers in the Linux kernel, right? And probably whatever you want to hook up already has one, and so it's in one place where everybody gets involved in debugging it. Everybody gets the ability to fix the issues, report the issues, find the issues, rather than kind of going picking stuff randomly off of the web, right? So the Linux kernel is kind of the one, and so trying to get people familiar with how to do that. We had a really great program with the Linux Foundation, called EALE,
Mm.
Embedded Apprentice Linux Engineer.
Oh.
And before all this COVID stuff, we were going around to the different trade shows and teaching people how to write I2C based device drivers, SPI, working with UARTs and USB, all within the Linux kernel, right? Because writing a module that goes in the kernel really isn't much more complicated than writing any program. You're generally limited to C. There's some work on Rust these days, so that can be a little bit of a problem for people. But C isn't that awful of a language, and but it's not much more complicated than just writing a program. You just have to implement a handful of functions if you want to make it a driver, right? And you load the program a little bit different. So you have to use the mod probe command to load your module. And then it's just a running program in the kernel. So right, we're doing a lot to try to teach people about how to work directly within the Linux kernel community. And that EALE program was a great one. And I'm looking forward to some of that stuff getting restarted again here now that we're starting to have trade shows in person again. We just had Embedded Linux conference in Austin going on at the same time as Embedded World 2. So it's nice to see everybody getting back to face-to-face, and we can do some more face-to-face teaching.
Yeah, here we go. I found it. EALE, Embedded Linux Engineer.
And that was using your favorite, the Pocket Beagle, right? So
yeah, look at it. It's the one that fits inside of a mini Altoids tin.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
we broke the Altoids Mint Tin form factor here.
So it goes.
We didn't even round the corners. I always pick on the one other single board computer that copied the BeagleBone's outer dimensions, but failed to round the corners, so it didn't fit in the Mint Tin. Well, now we've broken out of the Mint Tin too. So. But when you're running Cortex A72s, right, they can consume a fair bit of power, right? So rather than having anybody worry about any of the heat problems, we just went ahead and put a massive heat sink on here, and so now you can really crank it.
Nice. So there's a list of sort of suggested applications on here in the blog post, which we've linked below, along with most of these things. We've got computer vision, machine learning. Obviously, it's called AI64, but also things like AIoT gateways, autonomous robots and drones, machine vision, video analytics. Retail automation is an interesting one.
Yeah, the thing about what's in here, right? So. The big highlight, right, is of course the ability to do neural net stuff, right? So it's people use the TOPS number, right? So the TOPS on here is 8. It's an 8 TOPS engine. So a lot more than some of the other kind of low cost neural net platforms out there.
Yeah.
And it's an 8 TOPS engine, and the accelerator is actually running on the C7 DSP, so you can actually change the accelerator firmware if you want to dive all the way into it, right? So there's this matrix multiply accelerator in there associated with the C7 DSP. And so so the firmware for that is actually published, and you can actually get all the way that down in detail. But most people won't. Most people just use things like there's a TensorFlow Lite, there's ONNX, and there's NeoDLR, which is the Amazon one, right? So the TVM based. That's the kind of compiler technology in the TVM. So you've got those kind of 3 major AI frameworks that you can use either from Python or from C, and you'll automatically get the 8 TOPS neural net performance right out of that, right? So there's the tools to do there's models that have been kind of pre-quantized. There's this whole TI model zoo, and so like the common ones that you'd be familiar with, right? That not just the mobile nets, but like the YOLOs and all these other really common models that people are playing with, can now be accelerated. So we were showing off at Embedded World 4 of those different models running all at the same time, where you could do
cool.
The semantic segmentation, right? So the people would all just be one color, and sidewalks and other things would be different colors, and object detection. So you can tell me that I'm wearing headphones or that I'm carrying a cup, and then like pose estimation, and it's fast enough. We were able to actually do 4 of those at a time at 1080p, right? And keep up the 30 plus frames per second, right? So that's kind of the nice thing about having the accelerator, right? You can kind of run the full fledged algorithms, right? So it's kind of faster than like the original Coral or something like that, and it's all just integrated into one, right? And so you can just install the software and kind of and run the AI acceleration stuff. But the real magic of BeagleBone, right? I think that this kind of catches up now with the kind of the latest SBC performance with the Cortex A72s, plus a lot more with the neural net
Right.
accelerators. But part of the magic that is kind of like kept the BeagleBone Black. Even the BeagleBone Black, I think, is from 2010. The first BeagleBone, I think, was 2009 or so, or maybe 2002. It's a little long in the tooth, but right, it's
Still
super
does the
popular
job.
still.
Yeah.
It does a great job, right? So not a lot of people need that much more performance in that, but what the BeagleBones can do for you is not just give you like reasonable Linux performance, right, that kind of meets your needs to kind of deal with high level languages, deal with the internet, deal with all the things that that Linux gives you, but it's got these microcontrollers in there for doing ultra low latency stuff that you can't do with anything else, right? Like the fastest microcontrollers out there can't keep up with the microcontrollers on the
Mm.
BeagleBone. And so, like, the BeagleBone Black had 2 of these programmable real-time units. AS64 has 12.
That's
So a
nice.
whole lot of capability of dealing with real-time latency. There's also
You've got
R5s
these
in here. Go
You've
for it.
also got these super speed USB ports, which was, I had to look that up because I haven't heard too much about it, but it's been around for a while, and you've had them in multiple generations of these, I think.
Yeah, the original AI had one super speed Type A and one super speed
Mhm,
Type C. Now we've got a super speed hub on this one so we have 2 Type A ports,
mhm,
as well as high speed going to both the M.2 connector,
mhm.
as well as we extended the cape headers just a little bit longer, right? So
Hmm,
you can still plug in the old capes on here,
mhm.
but this connector just is 4 pins longer because we actually bring high speed USB, not the super speed, just the 480
Oh,
megabit stuff from board to board, and then yeah, there's some of the capes that you can connect up with this, and if you want to do CAN bus or relays or different things, like you can use those capes. The
yeah.
fan cape I wouldn't use for this one, right, because the fan blows on the wrong side. Um,
Yeah.
so there is a version of this heatsink that does have a fan for people that want it, but we don't see that you need it. It does
Mm.
run, it gets warm, right? So it floats in around 60 C, a little 60 65 C when it's running full bore, but the board can handle that, and yeah, so it can be a little warm to the touch, but with the heatsink there, it can handle all the processing capability that's there on the board.
Just don't
Um,
use your hands as the heat sink or your hands as the enclosure.
yeah,
3D print
it,
something.
it's I mean, yeah, you won't want to hold on to it too long. But yeah, so the Type C is a super speed port as well,
Mhm.
right? So you can do 5 gigabit device. So you can actually act as a USB device, and if you plug the board in, it'll come up with kind of the regular Beagle interfaces, which is a network over USB, as well as um, uh, uh, like a flash drive and this like a virtual serial port. So you can actually just plug in if you can get this board does consume a fair bit of power. It's you'd be prepared to provide it 15 watts.
Mm.
So, but if you've got a computer that can provide that, just connect it over your
Yeah.
Type C cable, and you can just log into it over that.
Mm.
Um, Otherwise, you still got the barrel jack on here, so you can either use a Type C supply or power Type C off your computer, or you can use the barrel jack for 5 volts to run off of that.
And
Um,
forgive me perhaps for mentioning this, but like the newer Raspberry Pi power supplies, if you have those already, if you have multiple types of little computers you like to play with, I think those are 3 amps and
yep,
5 volts. So you should be
yeah,
able to do that.
the Pi Type Cs would work fine.
Mm.
So if you
Um,
got one of those power bricks, that would work.
yeah, you mentioned the serial ports. You have two. You have the wake up domain serial port and the main domain serial port going on
Hmm.
here. Um,
Yeah, those are for the low-level debug
mhm.
interfaces, right? So if you wanted to get to, there's this project called U-Boot, which is an open source project that we primarily use. So this The SoC we're using on here boots first on one of these R5 microcontrollers. It boots up first. It's got its own power domain and safety stuff. And if you want to go crazy in that, you can actually like isolate it and run the R5s in lockstep so that it'll even be resilient to gamma ray bursts.
Nice.
Yeah, so it'll generate exceptions, and you can handle exceptions if like one of the processors was to get a radiation burst and actually execute the wrong instruction. It'll generate an exception, and you can handle that exception. So it's got some stuff in there for that. We don't expect the majority of do-it-yourselfers to kind of get in that deep.
Yeah, for some reason, I believe that the majority of that type of stuff comes from the sun, right? But for some reason, the first thing I thought of was like, if you work with a lot of superheroes, you gotta be careful.
It's real stuff. It's real stuff, and there are occasions where radiation from like sun you get the sunstorms that can occasionally hit a transistor at the right way to actually get an errand result. It is possible, but not. It's extremely unlikely to happen for you to observe one in your lifetime. So I wouldn't use this as a point to start distrusting your computer. It's like, oh, this gamma ray changed.
Always distrust your computer.
No. Okay, maybe if you bought a computer online, but you don't need to distrust your BeagleBone.
Well,
you can actually take control of it.
You share everything that's on this board. You can look at it and be like, okay, this is the hardware.
There's Allegro, so it's not a free design tool. This board was fairly complicated, so we weren't able to keep this one in KiCad, like the Pocket Beagle is in KiCad, right? So this is not using an open source design tool, but the design itself is open source. So if you can get your hands on Allegro, and we definitely welcome. We will. So what we've done in the past with like the original BeagleBone AI, we did work with some community members out of the KiCad world. I'll try to say it all different ways. And we did export the necessary Allegro files to get it ported over. So we're definitely very open to do that again here, right? To support getting this into an open electronics design tool chain, but the actual design work, right? You got to work with the tools in order to get the results you need.
That said, I would totally trust this computer. And
there's all sorts of degrees, and but it's really important for me for people to understand that computers are a lot of people think like the solution to everything is to unplug it and plug it back in, right? And you're always kind of at the whims of other people's code, the Linux kernel is a great source of knowledge. You can look through all of the source code, the bootloaders, right? And really want to get to a place where people understand that computers just do what you tell them. They don't do anything different. They're not magical. They only do what you tell them. They don't do anything else. And the idea of the hopefully don't plant the wrong seeds with the idea that the gamma ray burst changing things up. But if you have any last doubts, right, you can take two R5s and run them in lockstep, and make sure that each of them give you the same results.
There we go. It's a check. Okay. Any doubts that people have, I'm gonna put you in the main spot here. There we go. Going back to something you said a minute ago about super low latency, I have to mention one of my favorite applications for the BeagleBoard. I know that we already know that I love the Pocket Beagle, but there's the Bella platform, which is...
I love Bella. Love Bella.
So good. And their whole deal is that they're using, they're building hardware to work with the BeagleBoard computers, and they've actually got one with they're working on the BeagleBone.
Yeah, now they've kind of leapfrogged the BeagleBone AI a little bit, and they've started work on the AI 64. So just
cool.
no, we still love the BeagleBone AI, and if people are using it, right, we're going to keep making it, right. But the AI64 does have a ton of advantages on it. One is the massive
Yeah.
heat sink, right. I think the number one complaint about the
Okay.
original BeagleBone AI was that when it could actually get hot enough to shut down.
Boy.
Yeah, so the idea of getting away with the little heat sink, and then you can put a fan on it to cool it, right? For a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people out of the box, that just wasn't enough, right? You can run normal stuff on it without it rebooting, but as soon as you tried to have any software images that kind of used all the stuff, right? You needed some active cooling or some other
Mm.
heat sinking in order to prevent it from overheating and shutting down on you. Um, we took the Wi-Fi off and put it on an M.2. That way you can get the latest kind of
Mm.
Wi-Fi 6
Oh, cool. Yeah.
stuff. We
Maybe
moved to a
just.
nice. It's a mini display port.
Mm.
I will say that this is actually DisplayPort, not HDMI. So if you want to hook up
Yeah.
HDMI, you do need an active HDMI adapter, right? You can get those off of Amazon. So you just get an active HDMI adapter, and you can hook that up, right? So, but it's a SerDes. I don't know how many K, like I don't know, a lot. So it'll definitely handle 4K monitors, and plus, I think it'll handle a couple 4K monitors. Um,
Nice.
so you've got a lot of bandwidth out of that. But that having those small little micro connectors, right, can be a problem when you're really wanting to use displays and you're plugging them in and plugging. So the nice mini display port, right, is a more like proven connector in laptops, and right. So we try to build these things robust. Of course, we love Type C, but I think some of the muxing to try to handle the display over Type C was a little bit too much. So
Mm.
just give you the display port. Oh man, I get off on so many tangents, but the differences
It's
to AI. So that's one of them. The memory going up to 4 gigs of RAM instead of one, right? When you're doing AI algorithms, right, you get so limited on the memory so fast. Even people say that 4 gigabytes isn't enough, right? But you gotta
well,
gotta strike a balance, right? Um, and
yeah, we have someone asking how much it would cost with 8 gigs of RAM. Is that just a cost factor, or is there something else going on there as well?
the availability of an integrated
Mm.
a chip, right? So I don't think I think we have to go to a two chip solution there. If there's definitely some possibility of making an AI64 with 8 gigabytes of RAM. Please feel free to come on the forums and express your interest.
Mm.
We love to hear people's thoughts on the stuff we're making in the forums and in the chat. So we have we chat on IRC, and then we have a Slack that people can join through the easiest way is through the GSOC link. But there's if you come and greet us on the IRC channel, we can give you a Slack invite.
Nice.
Yeah, so yeah, always love to hear about it. 8 gigabytes is certainly a possibility. I think that wouldn't be in the immediate future. I think that it is a significant cost adder. The memories on the devices tend to be one of the more significant cost points of these boards.
Mm. We have another question from the thank you, by the way. We have another question from the community about what's the expected wattage when running ML/computer vision applications, and a follow-up where yeah, from the same person asking what sort of
No,
core.
the 15 watt number is running the
Yeah.
accelerators, right? So that's kind
Oh,
of
nice.
the full board number, right? So if you get a 3 amp supply, you really only have to go beyond that 3 amp supply if you start adding other peripherals, right? So if you start adding
Mm.
things to the Cape headers, to the to the Type A USBs, right? Because you can, you
Yeah,
know,
if you start using like these servo ones or whatever, you're gonna draw a lot.
yeah, and that's where you want to start providing some additional current through the we only support 5 volt over the Type C as well.
Mhm.
So you might want to go to the barrel jack to get some higher currents, but I often use 100 watt Type C power brick with it when I want to
Ooh, I want one of those. That
to
sounds nice. Never
Yeah.
worry about motors again.
Yeah. Um, so we are working on a robotics cape specifically for
Ooh.
AI64 as well. That's got a little beefier um, motor drive than what we've been using with the BeagleBone Black, right? So that we had the previous robotics cape, which is good for doing kind of some of the smaller DC motors.
Mm-hmm.
But like we're seeing people build things. That the Scuttle robot is a really cool one, and
Ooh.
it's a project coming out of the Texas A&M University. Um, they have a program, a robotics program there, and that's a cool one, and some beefier motor drive for there you go. So they've continued to work on that, and we're working with them on an
Oh,
AI64 version of that
that's so cute.
a robot kit, right? And um,
I can never stop seeing ultrasonic distance sensors as little eyes. It's just so cute. And that name is
yeah,
great.
we're even building a kind of a donkey car sort of. I'm sorry,
Oh,
a beagle.
cool.
We're building a beagle car,
Beagle
um,
car.
beagle car, and so that's going to use that robotics cape, and so like one of the requirements there is the motors can do us 10 meters per second, right? So
Mm.
right, because there's
Gotta go fast.
you want to be able to keep up with analytics and go fast.
Yeah.
So whenever we get the stuff going to some other shows, right? Maybe we'll go out to one of these DIY RoboCar events or something like that, and bring it out, right? But that's an ongoing project
Mm.
that'll be of course open source. Um,
Yeah. Um, so, speaking of Beagle Car, now's a great time to ask. Can you tell us the story behind the name of the BeagleBoard.org, BeagleBone? Did you have a
sure.
beagle? Did
Not me.
Gerald have a
Gerald,
beagle?
Gerald Gerald had a beagle, right? So the mascot's name is Boris, and that's because the guy that
Ah!
drew the little Drew Boris, right, gave it a name, right? So so
Ah!
Boris the Beagle is the name of the mascot, but the original beagle was Jake, and Gerald's dog, Gerald had the beagle Jake, and um, he said, well, all projects should have a code name. I'm gonna code name this Beagle because I love beagles, and
There's a little Darwin
underdog is a beagle,
thing as
and beagles are
well.
the coolest dogs.
Mm.
Personally, I'm a bit of a fan of Australian sheepdogs, but I do love
Mm.
beagles too.
Oh, those
Um,
are so cute. I love the little, they're like calico cats, but doggies, and they're so cute. They're fluffy.
so yeah, so Gerald had Jake, and he just came up with this as like a random code name, thinking it would never see the light of day. And I just said, forget it, I love it. I don't want to change it. That's perfect.
Nice. Careful with your code names, people. They
Yeah,
may
people stick with
It's a
it.
good one though, and you know it's very distinctive. Everyone knows the little beagle mascot, and you can put little hats on it or whatever. I don't know, but yeah, it's very distinctive. Um,
And the BeagleBone was kind of the bare bones BeagleBoard, right? So we took
mm,
from the mobile phone chip to something that was more stripped down. And it was this. So Gerald did the first prototype in this white color. So it was kind of like a bone color, and it was,
yeah,
and I requested the Altoids Mint Tin form factor,
nice.
and
Oh,
so
brilliant!
yeah, and so it was that became the BeagleBone.
I love it. I have another question for you. Do you have any favorite capes? Because there's two on here that I hadn't seen actually. This game pup cape before.
I
What do you
love the
got?
game pup. I love the game pup. We've had prototypes of like Microsoft Arcade, Make Code Arcade on there,
Uh-huh.
and I've never really we've never really published the really great how to on Make Code Arcade, but because Make Code
Mm.
Arcade is so much fun to play with on that board, and just playing emulators, right? So um, um, you know,
Oh, I've never
and,
seen
and
it.
and I got a little derailed for a while trying to build different kind of combo emulators, but running MAME on here is pretty easy. But yeah, Make Code Arcade is actually pretty easy. There's a few kernel patches that aren't that hard to deal with in order to try to get the daemon that handles the transfer of the files, so you can actually make it work directly from the UI. But
once you do, is it the same sort of Scratch style drag and drop thing?
You can. So yeah, if you look at the code for that, right, it's giving you like Sprite. There you go, right? So just like that, right? So the Scratch sort of drag and drop programming. You can go a little bit further with Make Code Arcade, I think, into some other programming environments, right? But yeah, there's so many cool community games out there, right? And
they're really pretty.
yeah. And we played with that for a little while, got it working, and then kind of got bored and moved on. But which is too bad, right? But so again, where Beagle does the best is kind of at the university level stuff, and we spend more time there working with the professors on textbooks and things like the continuing education with the EL. But we do love the younger education stuff, right? It's just a little bit harder to find time to go and address that, right? And we're very happy to support community efforts go to that. The foundation is a nonprofit, and we like one of our big things right now is the Google Summer of Code, because it's summertime, and that's where a lot of the stuff gets done. But I think nobody's really picked up the Make Code Arcade project. Oh man, I love that. The game pup though. So Aaron did the board design on that. Aaron over at GHI, and like the little robot and the rocket and stuff is just so much fun. And we've got a piezo in there, right? So you can actually make the sound, the game sounds. And the decision to go vertical, right? Blame that on me. But it's got an accelerometer in there if you wanted to create the code that would make it turn. So that's an option. And of course, it adds a microbus header and a USB, and also charge your battery, right? So you put a single cell LiPo on there and plug it on the back. That EL course, right? If you go up to that tech lab, right, that's the main teaching tool for the EL, right? So it's all about having something to target each of the different expansion buses, right? So the LEDs are actually over SPI, so you can it's an SPI based GPIO expander. So you can learn about interfacing with SPI.
And they're set up as a little 7-segment interface. Love it.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And you've got the analog for the light sensor, right? Because nicer to do something solid state. I love potentiometers, but to play with the analog. But this one, we use the light sensor just to try to get out, try to make it a little more solid state. Still got the push buttons, but anyway. Potentiometer was a little bit of a hassle. I2C, we use the accelerometer that's on there. For PWMs, we get to use 3 different PWM channels for the RGB LED. So you see that light bulb. That's a 3. Yep. Also, for PWM, you can do the buzzer, the piezo element. But because that's can be really annoying in a classroom setting. More of the teaching materials usually focus around the RGB LED instead of the
I've seen some in particular designed for classrooms where they have a hardware switch for the piezo buzzers, so you can be testing your code, and then just like when you're done with that part, you just like turn it off.
Turn it off. Yeah. I got a little negative feedback on teachers on including that, but I don't care. You got to got to keep it fun.
Yeah. I didn't realize this would expand, so I want to show the close up of this one as well. And we'll be, you can find this very easily from the BeagleBoard.org page.
It does require soldering as of now, right? The Pocket Beagles come without headers, and we've always talked about making Pocket Beagles with the headers already on them. And if we could keep them in stock long enough, we would. We have continuous production, but it's not in the volumes that we would want it to be in. And since they sell off the shelves as fast as we can make them.
Good problems.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Sometimes people learn to solder, maybe. If you want to.
Yeah, there you go.
You got a little computer because you wanted to learn about the hardware of computers. Well, now you get to learn to solder as well.
I love it.
Yeah, and there's a mentioned there being a microbus header on this guy. That's also a feature on this one as well, right?
Yeah, so that we have a
There we go.
shuttle connector. I
Oh,
said so
nice.
16 pin. So it's not a microbus like the standard microbus header. We've got a
Oh, okay.
I call it a microcontroller header on there because it's not as clear what it is, but it's
Mm.
you can either get to these from the Cortex 8 or there's a separate microcontroller where you can program these from as well.
Oh, okay.
But this is a microbus shuttle, so it goes to a ribbon cable. So if you look up microbus shuttle,
Interesting.
so they have a way that you can go from a ribbon cable to kind of the standard 16 pin microbus connector. And I'm a big fan of microbus, right? So not a lot of like the people talk about Feather. Of course we love Quick, Stemma, and
So many different ones, yeah.
Grove, right? So for what
All the
they
best
do,
for
but there's a
keeping.
whole bunch of different sensors that you just can't get with just 2 pins and power and ground,
Mm.
right? So we love Quick, Stemma, and Grove. But microbus really provides a lot more different options because you've got the SPI, you've got the UART, you've got some specific places for reset and interrupt,
Mm.
and addition to the power option. I think the most comparable is something like the Feather, where you see a lot of open source projects going around the Featherwing standard. But I like the cleanliness of the microbus specification. I really hope to see more people do it. It's a freely licensable trademark, right? So
Mm.
if you implement the microbus and if you decide to use the trademark, you have to just make sure you follow the specification, right? And so it's free to use. So I like that. It's a nice clean spec. And these guys are producing like a board a day, so
Yeah.
they're kind of
Incredible.
outpacing kind of the rest of the community. So I think people should look more at microbus. We're certainly doing a lot more, and we've been working on ways to support it directly within the Linux kernel as a native bus as well.
It's shaped like a little lock for security thing.
Yeah,
Another
they get cute.
Yeah, and with so many of them, whereas other systems may have like one Grove sensor for light sensing, etc., there's going to be multiple different ones that you can choose from if like a particular one doesn't fit your application. There's all these different versions of multi-stepper clicks. Um, like,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, and
a
tons
lot
of
of
different
different ones.
thermal ones and all kinds
Yeah,
of different displays,
like a
both
new
in
chip comes out,
e-hardware.
here comes a new clipboard.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, among the plug and play systems, yeah, it's a little larger, but and oh, this one looks really cool. Okay, I gotta stop looking at this because it's just gonna distract me.
So
But yeah, so
uh, just to kind
we
of
have
dive
that
back into
here.
some of the differences, right? This is the first 64-bit BeagleBone,
Yeah.
right? So we're finally in the A72. It ships the full 64-bit OS, right? There's a 16
Mhm.
gigabyte flash on board, so we ship with the Debian image running on there, and then all the you know the coprocessors like are available through remote proc.
Mm.
And I think one of the big news items is that we're working with Imagination to produce a fully open source GPU driver set. Um,
Cool.
yeah, so finally, the GPU will be open, like really open on one of our boards, right? We've really tried to forget that BeagleBone Black even has a GPU in it. The Imagination guys have actually done some university instructions around OpenCL and BeagleBone Black
Cool.
and other ways to use the GPU in teaching with BeagleBone Black. But for the most part, because it's so closed, I just try to pretend it doesn't exist. Um, but now we finally are getting open source GPU stack, so
Nice.
very, very excited about that.
You see people using these for like crypto mining stuff, or it's not
I
like
don't know
super
that
powerful. They're not
one.
really. I feel like these days people like go for extremely dedicated hardware for that stuff because people started building very dedicated
if
hardware for that
if
stuff.
if you're mining Bitcoin, you better have an array of ASICs, right? You better have
Yeah,
a couple racks of ASICs.
yeah.
Um,
People are very excited about the microbus. Yeah.
cool.
There is a question. You mentioned having a Slack, I think, and hybrid or box
Oh,
messaging.
I hate even having Slack, right? But if adding yet another proprietary chat, right? I mean, if we've been really trying to get an element, or well, Matrix, right? I don't know if you're familiar with Matrix chat, but it's
Hmm.
like one of using Matrix for chat and bridging to different services, including, perhaps even Discord, right? But
Ah.
we ourselves don't have Discord. I don't even remember how we got off on Slack at this point. That's kind of annoying to me, but they have a
Ugh.
nonprofit version that, so we don't have to pay for that
Oh, that's good.
as a non.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really challenging, like, every time there's a new platform for, media and discussion and stuff, it's like you have to have a presence on there as well, and, like and then you're not sure necessarily if it's gonna stick around or, like, there'll be some other new one that everyone's on, and then you'll have to, like, abandon this
You,
community or, like, have
you
someone on each one or, like and then you have to moderate them and make sure that they stay healthy. It seems like a lot,
you
so
have to
it's totally
understand how much
understandable.
this hurts my soul, right?
Ugh.
Kind of, growing up in the days of BBSs and looking forward to the promise of the internet and like this mass decentralization, and of course all of this stuff with the embedded
Ugh.
hardware for me has been very much about kind of creating internet devices where we actually
Mm.
make devices that kind of serve their own specific purposes, and having those things on the internet, and right. But I've watched as we've come up with open standards that would allow from better decentralization on the internet, and watch the large companies just tear them apart, right?
Ugh. Yeah.
The all the just things as simple as ID. And I still can't believe that we're this far into the 21st century and we're still communicating with SMTP that's without encrypted email. Uh,
Yeah.
it just baffles me that the
Oh.
public key infrastructure is what it is, and that there's still key signing parties. If you haven't heard of one, find out
I've
about
been to a key signing party at Noisebridge, my local hackerspace.
them.
Hackerspaces!
Yeah, and shouldn't we be past that by now? And shouldn't we have enough of a network of identity and trust that we can identify ourselves and share public keys without still needing to have small key signing parties?
Yeah, and
Um,
then on the other side, you have like, for your taxes in the US, at least for a while, they were trying to get everyone on this ID.me service that required you to upload your photo and get like facial recognition done on it and have that be like put in a
yeah,
biometric database, which is the whole other side of like privacy and identification stuff.
yeah.
I think they scrapped it,
It
fortunately.
feels like we should have more ownership of how our ID and privacy information is gathered. There's some pretty cool projects to kind of build internet servers in a box for kind of the critical stuff like mail, and but it's the practicality of some of it has really been hurt by some
Mm.
some some efforts, right? Like RSS, I mean, is kind of even really dead as a way to kind of publish information, right? We're all just I don't know. I don't want to get too down and on the idea that we've kind of lost the open internet, but the genie's definitely kind of fading back into the bottle.
Yeah.
Uh,
Especially even IRC, I think, didn't someone buy Freenode or something? And there's
There
some
was
kind
a
of bizarre
huge
story
huge
there.
issue with that. So I think that they'd already owned it, but I don't want to go into
Mm.
that rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
we're now in Liberia chat. So but it's
Ah.
a nice open standard. This but back in the 90s there was this thing called Jabber that was going to like unify all of the peer to peer communication stuff. And yes, if you look for #Beagle, on Libera Chat. That's where you're going
Cool.
to find kind of the core of our community.
Huh.
Um, and yeah, so there were all these open standards and things that were going to happen, as in the late 90s, as the MP3s are being pirated everywhere, and the peer-to-peer networking was kind of taking off. Um, and now I get to be bugged by Apple Music to subscribe to their
Yeah.
monthly fee service.
I
I just
remember
want the
getting
music I already own.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember making, maybe I shouldn't say this, doesn't matter. Like,
Oh.
plenty of use of, like, LimeWire, FrostWire on my university network to get hold of new music. It's very good. That
Yeah,
was, early 2000s, though.
and a lot of those really relied you to run untrusted
Oh,
platforms.
yeah.
I think that was
Absolutely.
a huge issue with a lot of that, and I think that eventually business models kind of caught up, and people have convenience, right? You pay for convenience, and I think most people are very happy
Yes.
to pay for things when they provide a service that's comparable, to what their expectations should be. Um, but I find that there's a huge amount of backsliding now going on with what you can actually do with your digital content, your digital
Mm,
devices. This really is a problem that Beagle was envisioned to help fix,
mm,
and I think we're still missing the formula, honestly. Just we want more people out there developing embedded systems, and we want to be more engaged with them. But I think that if I was completely fair to ourselves, I think we're still missing a little bit of how we go do that. And I think that it doesn't mean slow down or stop, right? Because
mm,
getting out something, I'm super intrigued by when I was in college, that I took a bunch of classes on neural networks, and they're like, oh, this
mm,
is so cool, and kind
mm.
of looked at some of the computing needs and other things, and it's like, okay, well, this isn't going to happen in my lifetime.
As yet.
Yeah, and here it is.
Yeah.
And
Speaking
and, sorry, I'll try to wrap up.
No, no, no.
There's I'm just super excited about what the potential is for AI, but I'm also super scared of what people are going to do as they don't understand it. Right, so we really want to be
Mm.
making tools that are ultimately going to help them better understand it, both the promise and the limitations. And
And
with
what we
the
should trust with this, what sort of functions we should put onto these machines and what we should not necessarily do.
exactly what you should and what you shouldn't put onto one of these machines, right? Because they can
Yeah.
solve all sorts of problems, but apply them to the wrong problem, and they're not going to be the right solution. I think
Yeah.
if you're not familiar with the bias that comes from neural networks, and focusing on having the right training data, and trying to
Yeah.
solve the right problem with that data, right? It's a really important thing to learn, right? Because this is they're it's just amazing that this has happened, where we've gotten here in my lifetime, and we still want to try to make sure that people have what they need to try to do it right.
Yeah. It's not simple stuff. And I think that is one of the huge advantages of having edge AI devices like this, things that can run machine learning and AI on device, is that then you don't have to send the raw data like people's faces, people's voices up to the cloud to who knows whose servers.
And
You
what if
can
you want
do
to, and you want to analyze your own data, right? And you want to
Mhm.
do your own monitoring, right? So yes, for people making products that go out into the world, and they want to keep that data local.
Mhm.
But what if I want to build my own solution for it, right? And right, that I'm going to have the tools where I can go and make those things myself, right? Where people can
Yeah.
kind of put together some of the pieces, parts, right? But when it's doing facial recognition of all your friends, it's because that's the data that you've put in there, and it's only going back to you.
Yes.
So yeah, this is
That's totally one of my inner conflicts because 'cause I'm so bad at names and faces, but I'm also like, I really don't want to employ any kind of, like, AI database for this stuff because, like, yeah, everyone that I know is like, yeah, I wish I could have like a machine that would help me with that, and I do too. And at the same time, it's like I don't want to like expose, if someone else gets a hold of that, like, then suddenly all my friends' biometric data is compromised, and like I'm the bad guy. No thanks. But there's gonna be ways to solve for this in the future, I think. Just we gotta
Well,
be careful with
but
how
not
we
unless we
deploy it.
work on it, right? So,
Mm,
and I think that we need to get the right people involved in the conversation
yeah.
and producing the solutions. That's why I think it's important to get the right tools into folks in universities, right? So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and to talk about this stuff and make it a part of the culture.
Yeah, get some people to actually understand the terminology, right? So,
Mm,
just getting the lingua franca right is a huge part of it.
mm. Well, amazing. We're right about at time. I want to thank you for. It is good to talk and
It's
see
so
people
great to
and
talk.
stuff again. And
Uh,
like, yeah, all the people that I don't get to see in person so much anymore, but hopefully soon. And yeah, thank you so much for telling us about your new piece of cool technology. I'm gonna put more of these links in the description to the video. Thank you everyone, Hacksters, for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another interview. And thanks again, Jason!
Bye, Alex.
Bye! Have a great week, everyone!